Hi guys, now in this lecture I will explain you what are WPF layouts. Now WPF layouts form a very important part in WPF since they are responsible for positioning and sizing of controls, or they are responsible for you to build a WPF UI or graphical user interface. So if you are developing a WPF application, you just need to be very sure about your layouts concept, because that will help you to design a UI and place your controls accordingly in your UI. So let's go through our slides. Now to define the layout of our window, we use layouts. Now there are 5 common layouts which derive from panel class. Now all these layouts what I am going to describe, they derive from panel class. So panel is the base class of all the layouts. So this point you can remember for your interviews. Now there are basically 5 types of panels: stack panel, wrap panel, canvas, dock panel and grid. So let's look into them one by one through an example, because the points that are listed in these slides are quite long, so I don't want to read those points first. Let's look into our Visual Studio how to design these panels, and then we will go through our slides. So let's go through stack panel first. Now here I have a empty WPF application with me, and it has a window and it has a grid. So let's first look what happens when we don't have a panel inside our window. Okay, let me try to have a button inside a window without a panel. So let me give it a height of 50 pixels and width of 100. Okay, so here I have got a button in here. So let me drag this down. Let me try to run this application, and here it goes. Here's the button for me, and it works as usual. Means I have not written anything in button, but it will work as usual. And imagine, see, there's no content in this button because I have not defined a content in the button declaration. But it seems to be working fine without a panel, right? But what's the problem? The button is placed into the window, but if we need to move the position of this button, I cannot do so. See, I cannot drag this button anywhere. It's just positioned in the default space of this window. So that's why we need a panel to actually position this button. Okay, so in order to position the controls, we need panels inside our window. Okay, so let me remove this first, and let me have a stack panel first, because we are going to learn about stack panel. And here it comes, my stack panel, and I have a stack panel inside my window. Now what does this stack panel does? It stacks the controls one over the other. You can imagine as a stack of a stack of books. So those books are kept one over the other. So that's a stack. So same thing goes with stack panel. So and it has an orientation property which stacks the controls in vertical direction or horizontal direction. So let me have some controls in first. So I have a pre-typed code for this stack panel. So I am using a label, I am using a text box, I am using a checkbox with name as checkbox 1, and I am using a checkbox again, checkbox 2. And you can see all these controls are stacked vertically. So if I change the orientation as horizontal, those will be stacked horizontally. So this is basically the stack panel for you. So let's add some more controls in here. Let me add 2 list boxes. So I have declared a list box, and I have closed the list box in here, and then this list box has a list box item, and in that I have defined a item 1. So that item 1 is present in the list box as a list box item, and same goes with the other list box. So both of these list box are here, and then I am closing the stack panel. And let me also add a button. So let me add a button, and now let's try to run this application and see how my UI looks. And you can see my UI is perfect. Okay, I can use this checkbox. I can select these items in the list box items. I have a text box that's working fine, and then this is the label which you can put a text on it. So this is all about stack panel. So let's move back to our slides. So stack panel is a simple container control that just shows one element after the other. The orientation of the stack panel could be horizontal or vertical, and that we have seen in our example. So let's move to wrap panel now. So let me comment this stack panel out. I don't need this stack panel anymore, and let me collapse it. And now let me have a wrap panel inside my window. Okay, so that it holds my controls. And let me have a button inside this wrap panel. So this is a simple button with width as 100 pixels, and I have given margin because just to have a space between the buttons. And now let me have another button, say another button, say another button. Okay, so I have 5 buttons with me, or let me make it 6 buttons. Okay, so you can see my buttons are being wrapped in a line. Okay, and since there is no space in here, sufficient space in here, so my button goes to the next line. Okay, and same goes with the orientation of wrap panel as a stack panel. So I can define a orientation horizontal, or I can define a orientation as vertical. So all my buttons are stacked or are wrapped in a vertical direction. Now you might be wondering what's the difference between a stack panel and wrap panel if they are doing the same things, right? So let me try to run this application and show you what's the difference between stack panel and wrap panel. So this is a wrap panel, and you can see all these buttons are wrapped in a line, and there is not sufficient space in here, so this button comes to next line. And let me expand this UI now, and you can see as soon as it gets more space, the button comes in line. And let's try to do this same thing with the stack panel. So I've changed this stack panel. Now let's try to run this. You can see all these buttons are stacked, right? But they're not stacked like wrap panel. They're not wrapped. Means even if they are not getting enough space, they are stacked one after the other. So there's no impact of changing the size of the UI on stack panel. Whereas in wrap panel, that adjusts according to the size of your UI. So this is the difference between wrap panel and stack panel. So let me make it back to wrap panel, and you can see all my buttons come according to wrap panel. So let me now comment this out. So I don't need a wrap panel. And let me go to a slide. So the wrap panel positions the children from left to right, one after the other, as long as they fit into the line, and then continues with the next line. The panel's orientation can be horizontal or vertical, and this point we have seen in our example. Now let's come to canvas. So let me have a canvas panel in here. And now what this canvas panel will enable us? They will enable us to place controls according to our choice. That is, we can place our controls according to some coordinates, same as you do in window forms. So in window forms, you put a button and then you drag that button accordingly where you need to place that button, right? So this is the same thing that this canvas does. So let me make the background of this canvas as, say, green. Okay, and let me paste some pre-typed code. So here it goes. So I have a label, I have a text box, I have a button. Simple. Okay, and let's try to run this. And you can see here is my UI. It says it has a text box, it has a clicking button, and it works fine. But you can see There are some canvas dot top property in here, canvas dot left. That's the property of canvas, and those are called attached properties. So I will cover these attached properties and dependency properties in a later video session. Just for now, you just need to understand that canvas uses attached properties for the positioning of controls. So let me change the position of this control in here, and you can see the coordinates of this and this are changed. Now I can do it something like this, and you can see canvas.top has changed to 84, canvas.left is changed to 45. Okay, so what this canvas is helping us, it helps us for explicitly placing the controls on our UI. Let's move back to our slides. So canvas is a panel that enables you to explicitly position controls. Canvas defines the attached properties left, right, top and bottom, and that can be used by the children for positioning within the panel. So this is what we have seen in our example. Now let's go back to our example and let's comment this canvas thing out, and let me collapse this. Okay, and let's see the another panel called as dock panel. Okay, so I have a dock panel inside a window. Now if you are aware of docking property of window forms, a dock panel might be very easy for you to understand, and this is also very simple panel. And let me paste 5 buttons inside a dock panel, and let me run this UI. So you can see all these buttons are docked. Okay, but this really doesn't make sense, because if you need to understand dock panel, you just need to design a UI. Okay, so let me paste a pre-typed UI for you and make you understand how and where we use dock panel. So let me paste the UI in here inside this dock panel, and you can see my UI is ready the moment I paste the XAML inside a dock panel. So let me try to run this, and then I will explain you one by one what I have done. So this is a text block control. This is a text block. So all these things are text blocks in here. So you can imagine if you have a label in here, you have a big text box in here, or a status bar in here. If you have designed a UI like this, so this dock panel could be used in this manner. That is, you can have a menu here, you can have a big text box or list box in here, you can have a scroll bars or something like that in here, and then when you do something, your status will be displayed in here. So all these things could be achieved with the help of dock panel. So this is the positioning of the elements using a dock panel. For simplicity of this video, I have just pasted the text blocks in all the UI. Okay, so let me go back to my XAML and see what XAML I have used. So here's a dock panel. I have used a border so that these all controls could be clearly differentiated. Then I have used this text block in here. So this text block says menu, this text block says ribbon, and then this text box says status, the below text block, and this is the left side, and this is the remaining part. So this is the remaining part, and this is the left side. Okay, so you can note it down this XAML and practice it yourself. That concept will be more clear once you do it yourself. Okay, so I hope the concept of dock panel is clear to you. So let me comment this out once more so that I don't have anything in my window. And let's get to our slides once I collapse this. So we can specify the area in which child control should be arranged. Dock panel defines the attached property dock, which we can set in the children of control so that values left, right, top and bottom. And this is similar to dock functionality of window forms. So this we have seen in our example. Now let's move to grid panel. Now grid panel is the most powerful concept that's been used in WPF. That is, if we need to arrange our controls using rows and columns, we use grid panel. Also in big projects, when you design a UI, and if you are working with big projects, if you design a UI, you need to use grid panel. So grid panel is most commonly used container inside WPF. We can arrange our controls according to rows and columns. So let's quickly move to Visual Studio and see how I can design a UI using a grid container. So I have a grid inside my window in here, and let me have some controls inside this grid. Okay, so but remember, the controls would be placed inside a rows and columns, so you need to design your grid accordingly. So before we design our UI, let me show you what our UI will look after we have designed it. So let me go to Paint, and this is my UI, right? So I have first name, a text box, a last name, a text box, a address, and then a big text box. Okay, and then I have a button. So you can see this UI looks perfect, but how is it's arranged? It's arranged with the help of a grid that's divided into rows and columns. Okay, and so I need to have 4 rows, 1 row, second row, third row, and then fourth row in here. So 4 rows and 2 columns. This is the first column, and this is the second column. So let's design our grid with 4 rows and 2 columns. And you always define a rows and columns with grid dot row definition. So this row definition is an attached property that's defined inside that grid, and you need to cut this and paste it here. Okay, and then need to have 4 rows. So let me define a row definition. So this row definition defines a row inside a grid, and then again I need to have 4 rows. So I have defined this row definition 4 times, and I have kept the height of these row definition as auto, so the height could be adjusted accordingly. And then I will define 2 columns for my grid. Okay, and same concept it takes it. I need to define the column definitions. Okay, and then I will have column definition, height. Okay, we have a width property in column, so I don't have a height property in column definition. Okay, so I have a column definition. This defines my first column, and then I will copy this, and so here it goes. I have 2 columns in here. Okay, so what we have 4 rows and 2 columns inside our grid. Here are the 4 rows and 2 columns. Now after I have defined my rows and columns inside our grid, we will start placing our controls in those rows and columns. So I have some pre-typed code with me, so that this video doesn't become so long if I start typing them. So I have some pre-typed controls in here. So I have copied this content inside our grid. So you can see my UI looks perfect in here. So I have a label control which is placed in grid.row is 0. So grids rows and columns are 0 index. That is, the first row will have a 0 index, and column also, the first column will have a 0 index. So this grid.row is placed at 0. This label grid.column is placed at 0, and the content of that label is first name. So it's very simple XAML code in here. Just the complex part for you, for the beginners, will be grid.row is 0 and column.row is grid.column is 0. So this is the first row and first column, and same goes in here. So this label is grid.row is 1. So this is a 0th row, and this is the first row. So the row is 1 and column is still 0. So this last name is in the 0th column and first row, and then the third one is in second row and 0th column, and you can see in here. So this grid.row, the index is 2 and column is still 0. So this is the 0th column, this is the first column, this is the 0th row, this is the first row, This is the second row. Great. Okay, and same goes with these text boxes. So this text box is at first column, this is the first column, and 0th row, the row is 0. And same goes with other text boxes, and same goes with this button. So this is in the first column and third row, that is fourth row, the index of that row is third. Okay, and let me make the show grid lines property of this grid as true, and you can see all the rows and columns in with the help of these grid lines. Okay, so in the beginning you may find it a bit complex to understand this concept, but once you grasp the concept, it's very easy for you to design your UI according to rows and columns inside a grid. So let's move back to our slides. So using the grid, we can arrange our controls with rows and columns. For every column we can specify a column definition, for every row we can specify a row definition. The grid also allows a star sizing, whereby the space for the rows and columns is calculated according to the available space and related to other rows and columns. So let's see what we mean by this point by star sizing. So let's run our UI first and see. First name, there's a text box, last name, there's a text box, and then there is a address text box, which is a very big text box, right? I can write a lot of things in this text box, right? How I am achieving this big text box? Did I specify anywhere the shape and size of this text box that this should be large? No. So what I'm doing is at this row. So this row I have specified as the height of that row I have specified as star. So whatever be the remaining part of this application, this row takes that size. So first row is of size auto, second row is of size of auto, right? And the fourth row is also of size auto, or height is auto, but the third row, the height is star. So whatever be the remaining height of the row, that's been taken by this row. So suppose I change this row's height to auto, you can see now all the four rows are of all the first three rows are of same size, and the remaining last row has taken the size. So let me run this, and you can see my address text box has become small. So I need to specify the star to the third row, and let's also make this as auto. I don't need to hard code that height, and now let's try to run, and you can see my UI works as expected. So this row is taking the remaining size of the UI, and all the other rows are of height auto, and this is done in here. So all these rows are auto, and this is star to take up the remaining height. So this is specified in our slide. So using the grid, we can arrange your controls with rows and columns. For every column we can specify a column definition, for every row we can specify a row definition. The grid also allows star sizing, whereby space for the rows and columns is calculated according to the available space and relative to other rows and columns. So you can practice all these things on your own and get a good grasp of these layout containers, because these containers form a base of your UI designing in WPF. So that's it guys for this video. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any doubt, please leave a comment below and do subscribe to my channel. Thank you so very much.